so we'll talk about that. We'll go over lawful status and benefits afforded under that status. Family reunification, you'll see the principal or the primary person coming to the US and requesting that benefit. And then afterwards, they have family members abroad who want to join them. So there is a family reunification process. There's also a path to citizenship, because once you get your lawful status, that's really not it. You want to get full rights and privileges as a citizen, all the way to voting. And then there are rights and protections, what you should do if you encounter ICE, that Cecilia will talk about. And then finally, we'll round it up with proposed regulations under this particular administration as it pertains to asylee rights.
Okay, so can I translate?
Sure.
Okay. اليوم بدنا نحكي عن اللاجئون وطالبون اللجوء وطالبي الوضع القانوني والمزايا. بدنا نحكي على إعادة توحيد العائلة والطريقة إلى المواطنة والحقوق والحماية واللوائح المقترحة.
Thank you. So, hi everyone, I'm Cecilia, and thank you for the introduction. So first, we just want to start with a quick definition of the asylee and the refugee program.
بدي بلش إنه تعريف شو هو اللاجئ، شو هو الطالبين اللجوء.
So essentially, asylee status and refugee status is a protection for individuals who seek it from the United States.
اللجوء وطالبين اللجوء هو مثل انه عندك مثل حقوق انه الحمايه من الولايات المتحده تحميكي بهذه الحقوق.
And the protection is specifically because they fear persecution, meaning they fear being seriously harmed in their home country.
وحمايتهم من لأنه البلد اللي هن تركوها كان فيها مشاكل وكانوا مهددين. الولايات المتحدة بتحمي اللاجئون وين بيصلوا لأمريكا.
And I won't get too much into the specifics of the application process, but I will talk about once somebody has the status, what are we will talk about what are those benefits and those responsibilities.
وما رح نركز كتير على هالموضوع بس بنوصل لهالنقطة بنحكي فيها شوي أكثر بالتفصيل.
So the main distinction between the refugee program and the asylee program is where the applicant is when he or she is seeking that protection.
الفرق بين اللاجئين وطالبين اللجوء هو وين الشخص اللي موجود وقت اللي عم بيقدم هالمعاملة.
Essentially, individuals who are physically outside of the United States and applying for protection are applying under the refugee program.
طلب اللجوء هو للأشخاص اللي قاعدين برات أمريكا.
And individuals who are physically in the United States are applying for the protection under the asylee program.
وطالبين اللجوء هن الأشخاص اللي موجودين بأمريكا.
So once that so the status is granted, certain family members of that applicant can also benefit from that status.
Which benefit?
From the refugee status or asylee status.
Okay. وقت اللي بتحصلوا على هالحقوق بعض الأشخاص من العائلة بيحصلوا على هالحقوق.
And we'll talk about later on more specifically who are those family members. But this is essentially what we'll be talking about throughout the presentation, and I'll hand it over to Sophia.
Okay, بنحكي بالتفصيل أكثر مع لما الشخص الثاني بيحكي.
Next slide. Okay. So for asylees and refugees, there are collateral benefits or additional benefits that accompany such statuses.
في فوائد للاجئون والطالبين اللجوء لهم فوائد جانبية.
As Cecilia mentioned, asylees and refugees returned to their country of nationality, basically from where they fear persecution.
Okay, so هل تحميهم من البلد اللي هن اجوا منها يلي هن كانوا معذبين فيها.
And it's important to know that persecution could be based off of certain grounds like political opinion or religion.
طرق التعذيب في بلادهم بتكون يا سياسية أو ديانية أو أي شيء، يعني يا دياني يا سياسي.
Other grounds are national origin, membership in a particular social group or race.
بأي العرق أو بالدين أو بالسياسة.
So once they've claimed that persecution and they get the asylee and refugee status, they can actually, in the US, access social services and assistance. Refugees are funded by the Office of Refugee Resettlement.
يمكنهم الوصول إلى الخدمات الاجتماعية والمساعدة الممولة من قبل مكتب إعادة توطين اللاجئين المصرح لهم بالعمل في الولايات المتحدة.
Asylees and refugees are authorized to work in the United States.
يمكن التقدم بطلب الحصول على بطاقة العمل في الولايات المتحدة.
And evidence or the documentation to show such work authorized status is this photo in the slide. It's an EAD card, Employment Authorization Document card.
وهذه الصورة يلي بالموجودة على هذا الصفحة هي الصورة اللي بتأكد إنه أنتوا عنا بطاقة عمل.
So while you have authorization to work, just by virtue of having the status, it's always a good idea to apply for the EAD card.
يمكن الطلب بتقدم بالحصول على بطاقة الضمان الاجتماعي الغير المقيدة قد يطلب
Asylees and refugees can also apply for an unrestricted Social Security card.
يمكن التقدم بطلب الحصول على بطاقة الضمان الاجتماعي الغير مقيدة.
They can also request permission to travel overseas.
قد يطلب الإذن بالسفر إلى الخارج.
But this is an area where they really need to get legal guidance because you're typically not using your passport issued by the home country where you're claiming persecution.
ولازم تطلب المساعدة لأنه هذا جواز السفر هو مصدره مو من البلد اللي أنت خلقت فيه.
There's a process whereby you can apply for a refugee travel document in order to facilitate travel abroad.
قد يطلب الإذن بالسفر إلى الخارج.
So if you're working with a nonprofit organization or legal organization, they can assist you with both the EAD card and the refugee travel document if you need such documentation.
وإذا عندك إذا في حدا بيساعدكم من المنظمات الاجتماعية بيقدروا بيساعدوكم تقدموا على هذا البطاقة.
We do caution you if you are traveling and you want to go back to your home country where you fear persecution, you could put your status at risk in the United States.
إذا سافرتوا لبلدكم اللي أنتم كنتوا مضطهدون فيها بتحطوا ريسك، بيحطوا خطر إنه ما فيكم ترجعوا يمكن لهالبلد اللي هو الولايات المتحدة.
You essentially want to avoid a showing that you've gone back to that country where you feared persecution, because essentially it looks like you are claiming protection under that country, right? So it goes against your asylum or refugee application. So the best guidance is to get legal advice before you engage in travel.
المفروض تطلبوا رأي حدا فهمان مثل محامي، لأنه إذا رحتوا للبلد اللي كنتوا مضطهدين فيها معناتها أنتم ما كنتوا مضطهدين وبتخسروا حقوق رجعتكم إلى الولايات المتحدة.
Okay, and then finally, asylees and refugees can petition to bring their spouses or unmarried children to the United States.
فيكم تقدموا تضامن لجلب الزوج والزوجة والأطفال اللي هن مش متزوجين إلى الولايات المتحدة.
And that can be a quite lengthy process, so we encourage you to get the appropriate legal guidance if you are engaging in that family reunification process.
وهذا الطلب بيطول كتير، إذا بدكم تقدموا بده ياخد وقت، بلشوا بأقرب وقت ممكن.
Next slide. Responsibilities of asylees and refugees are, there's a few. You want to make sure that you're obeying all federal, state, and local laws.
اللاجئون والطالبين اللجوء مسؤولياتهم أول شيء الالتزام بجميع القوانين الفيدرالية والولايات والمحلية والولائية والمحلية.
If you're engaging in employment, you need to make sure you're paying federal, state, and local taxes.
وإذا كنت تشتغل دفع الضرائب الفيدرالية والولائية والمحلية ضروري.
And then males between the ages of 18 and 26 years old must register with the Selective Service.
ويجب على الذكور الذي تتراوح أعمارهم بين 18 و 26 عاماً التسجيل في الخدمة الانتقائية.
And as we mentioned previously about travel, if you want to engage in international travel, you have to request permission to return to the United States before leaving the US. And that's by applying for the refugee travel document, even if you're an asylee.
وإذا أردت السفر يجب طلب الإذن بالعودة إلى الولايات المتحدة قبل المغادرة من خلال التقدم بطلب الحصول على وثيقة سفر للاجئين.
You're also obligated to send your minor children to school.
وإرسال الأطفال القصر إلى المدرسة.
And then finally, apply for lawful permanent resident status after having accrued 1 year in the United States if you are a refugee.
تقدم بطلب الحصول على وضع الإقامة الدائمة القانونية بعد عام واحد في الولايات المتحدة إذا كنت لاجئاً.
We talked previously about family reunification, so here's just a little bit more detail. If you are a refugee or asylee in the United States and you want your family members who are abroad to join you, you can petition for your spouse or child, unmarried, under the age of 21, to join you.
إعادة توحيد العائلة إذا كنت لاجئاً طالب اللجوء إلى الولايات المتحدة تريد أن ينضموا إليك أفراد العائلة الموجودون بالخارج يمكنك تقديم التماس إلى زوجك وأطفالك غير متزوجين والذين تقل أعمارهم عن 21 عاماً للانضمام إليك.
The petition, it's an I-730 petition. Again, we encourage you to get legal guidance, legal counsel, if you are pursuing this avenue.
يجب أن يكون no I couldn't. Can you repeat it, please?
Just get a lawyer. A lawyer if you want to petition.
I'll get a lawyer.
Have your family.
Okay. يجب الحصول على محامي إذا كنت تريد طلب العائلة التضامن العائلي.
And one important point is the child must be unmarried and under 21 at the time that the principal applicant applied for asylum or refugee status.
وأهم شيء أن الطفل يكون غير متزوج وتحت العام 21 حتى يتقدم على المعاملة لطلب اللجوء.
That family member who's going to join you is not required to have a claim of persecution to qualify them as an asylee or refugee.
والشخص الذي من العائلة المطلوب الذي تطلبه مش ضروري يكون عنده ستاتس حالي تبعت اللاجئين.
Rather, they can derive the status or benefit just by showing the relationship.
بيقدروا بيحصلوا على هذا الطلب just إذا في عندهم يفرجوا إنه هن متزوجين أو عائلة واحدة.
So below here we have a few process steps for family reunification. You file,
go ahead. Sorry. No, go ahead. No. You
file form I-730 for the refugee asylee relative petition. There's no filing fee.
بتقدم على معاملة اسمها 1730 لاجئين وطالبين اللجوء للعائلة بدون دفع.
There is a filing deadline, so file within 2 years of your arrival to the US.
في وقت محدد لتقديم المعاملة بعد 2 سنين من وصولك إلى أمريكا.
There are certain exceptions to that filing deadline, but try to file within the 2 years of arrival.
في أشياء محدودة لازم بس حاول تقدم خلال سنتين.
And then you need to gather all required documentation, proof of your relationship, proof of the asylee status or refugee status, and include that in the petition that you file with the Immigration Service.
وحاول تحصل على كل المعلومات التي تضمن أنك متزوج وعليك لك العلاقة مع العائلة وكل الأوراق إنه أنت مقدم على اللجوء ولا طالبين اللجوء.
I just wanted to add, and we didn't put it on the slide, sorry about that, but if you're an asylee, just file within 2 years of getting asylum status.
أوكي، إذا كنت طالب اللجوء حاول أن تقدم على هذا بعد سنتين من ما تحصل على طلب اللجوء.
Okay, I'll go to the next slide. All right, so now we're going to talk about path to citizenship. So when somebody has refugee status and asylee status, what is the path to becoming a United States citizen?
الإقامة القانونية الدائمة والتجنس.
Okay. So first, for refugees, if you're a refugee, you must apply for lawful permanent residence. And I know Sophia mentioned it in the previous slide, but I just wanted to reiterate that.
إذا كنت لاجئ لازم تقدم على البطاقة الخضراء.
So to file for residency, a refugee has to show that they've been physically present in the United States for 1 year.
لحتى تقدم على هالبطاقة لازم يبين إنه أنت صار لك سنة كاملة بالولايات المتحدة.
So as Sophia mentioned, like if you decide to travel while you have refugee status, just make sure that that doesn't interrupt your meeting of your physical presence in the United States for when you submit your application for residency.
So إذا قررت تسافر لازم تتأكد إنه أنت عم تتأخر لازم تكون سنة كاملة قاعد شخصياً في أمريكا. إذا سافرت بتنقص منهم هالأيام.
So now in comparison, if you're an asylee, you have the option of applying within 1 year of having asylum status.
إذا كنت طالب اللجوء بتقدر تقدم بعد سنة كاملة بعد ما تحصل على طلب اللجوء.
And same evidence requirement, you must show that you've been physically present in the United States as an asylee.
كمان بنفس الطريقة بدك تكون تقدم إنه أنت صار لك سنة كاملة قاعد بأمريكا.
So that's why Sophia was explaining and reinforcing, if you choose to travel, you know, just seek advice and make sure that you're aware that that may affect your physical presence requirement for when you want to apply for residency.
إنه مثل ما صوفيا قالت إنه لازم تتأكدوا 100% إنه تسألوا حدا محامي أو هذا حتى تتأكدوا إنه أنتوا عم تروحوا سنة كاملة عم تأثروا على عدد الأيام اللي قاعدين فيها بأمريكا.
So we have a little bit of a graphic design here just to show you the timing of the path to citizenship for asylees and refugees. So as I mentioned, if you're an asylee, you have the option of applying. You can apply after 1 year of having asylum status.
sorry.
No, you can go ahead.
الإقامة القانونية الدائمة والتجنس. Okay, go ahead.
And then if you're a refugee, you must apply after being physically present as a refugee in the United States.
Okay, so it's the same thing like the slide before. Okay.
Yeah, but now, so now when you continue your path, so after you've been, say you're an asylee and you've been granted lawful permanent residency, what is next? You want to, your path to citizenship will then be 5 years after your admission. And when I will explain what admission means, but 5 years after your admission as an asylee.
اوكي سو بعد 5 سنين من وصولك وتقديم طلب اللجوء، بعد 5 سنين بتوصل لمرحلة الإقامة القانونية الدائمة والتجنس.
And when I use the word admission, it's a legal term, but technically is when you're granted asylum, because even though you're already physically in the United States, but you've been granted asylum. So that's an admission.
Yeah. انه بمعنى انه وقت بتحصل على طلب اللجوء بتعد 5 سنين وبعدين بتوصل لمرحلة الإقامة القانونية الدائمة.
The reason I make that distinction because when you're admitted as an asylee will determine when the 5-year, let's say 5-year clock will start ticking so you can apply for citizenship.
إنه بعد ما تحصل على طلب اللجوء بعد 5 سنين بتبلش تحصل على الإقامة القانونية.
So an asylee applies for residency. They use form I-485. It's going to be a long one, so go ahead, Rania.
لما الطالب اللجوء بيقدم على التجنس في مثل بيقدم على شغلة اسمها what is it called?
I-485.
I-485.
Yeah. And once that petition is granted and you become a resident, your 5 years start from a year before your I-485 has been granted.
Okay.
You want me to say it again? That's what I was saying.
Say it again.
Okay. So I'm going to do an example. I'm an asylee. I've been in the United States as an asylee for 1 year. I'm going to submit my residency application, I-485. Do you want to?
اوكي سو انا بس صرت طلبت اللجوء بعد سنه كامله بقدم على الاي 45 and then بعدها قبلها بسنه ببلش العد تبع ال5 سنين. What is it?
So then after my petition for residency has been granted,
بعد 5 سنين بعد ما اخذت الاقامه بعد 5 سنين
my 5 years so I can apply for citizenship will start ticking 1 year before I was granted residency.
Okay, so بعد 5 سنين من الطلب، بعد ما اخذنا طلب اللجوء بعد 5 سنين بتاخذ الإقامة القانونية الدائمة، بعدين بتقدم على الجنسية، بس الجنسية بدها 5 سنين، بتبلش العد من السنة اللي قبلها، من رابع سنة يعني.
It's like 4 years. You're waiting 4 years basically after you get your green card.
So essentially, 4 years after I get my green card, then I can apply for citizenship.
Yeah. بعد 4 سنين من حصول البطاقة الخضراء بقدم على بحصل على البطاقة الباسبور.
So if I'm a refugee, the 5 years start ticking the minute that I am admitted into the United States, since I was admitted as a refugee.
اوكي بس اللاجئ اللي بيجي من برا باليوم اللي بيبلش بالعد من اليوم اللي بيدخل فيه امريكا بيبلش العد تبع ال5 سنين.
So the same thing, once my residency is granted, since I was already present for 1 year, 4 years after that I can apply for citizenship as a refugee.
اوكي اللاجئين بعد سنه كامله بيقدموا على الاقامه القانونيه الدائمه، بعد ب4 سنين بيقدموا على السيتيزنشيب، على التجنس.
So one thing I want to talk about, because I know that took a while, briefly, is something that we've been hearing a lot in the community called public charge. So essentially, public charge is just a test that immigration officers apply to certain immigrants applying for residency.
Public charge is المسؤول العام. Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah. So a public charge is a test that immigration officers apply to certain immigrants who are applying for residency.
المسؤول العام هو اللي هو الشخص المسؤول اللي بيشتغل بالببليك عام، بالمسؤول العام هو اللي I couldn't get that one. Sorry.
Do you want me to say
Is it written? Is it written in the slide?
Yeah, it is.
Where?
It's a summary of the first point. Public
Okay,
charges
so
are
let's.
becoming
Okay, so let me read it then. على نية تهمة سبب من أسباب عدم القبول. sorry. أسباب عدم القبول تستخدم خدمات المواطنة والهجرة الأمريكية اختبار الرسوم العامة لتحديد ما إذا كان من المحتمل أن يصبح شخصاً ما رسماً عاماً.
Okay. So recently the administration has developed a new test to essentially bar individuals from qualifying for residency through public charge.
مبدئياً تم تطبيق الاختبار على بعض المهاجرين المتقدمين للحصول على الإقامة الدائمة التقدم بطلب الحصول على البطاقة الخضراء.
And just for the sake of time, I just want to clarify that there's certain immigrants who this public charge test does not apply to. And one of those groups is asylees and refugees.
في ناس ما بيقدروا بيغطيهم المسؤول العام وهن اللاجئين وطالبين اللجوء.
So if you hear a lot about, you hear it a lot because there's a lot of challenges in the court going on right now with this new test. But if you're applying for residency as an asylee or refugee, this public charge test is not applied to you.
اوكي في مشاكل كتير بالمحاكم على هاي المسؤول العام بس انتم كلاجئين وطالبين اللجوء هذا الشيء ما بيأثر عليكم.
So
we can go through these quickly because we want to get to the rest of the presentation, but this is just a few points about lawful permanent resident status and your rights.
الإقامة الشرعية الدائمة. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You have the right to live permanently in the United States, provided you do not commit crimes that would make you deportable from the US. So this is really an intent-based process. You're intending to live here permanently. That means you have a home here, you have ties here, you have family here. That's how you show you're living here permanently.
الإقامة الشرعية الدائمة الحقوق بصفتها حالة دائمة قانونية العيش بشكل دائم في الولايات المتحدة بشرط ما لا ترتكب جرائم وقد لا تجعلك قابلا للترحيل من الولايات المتحدة العمل في الولايات المتحدة أي عمل قانوني من اختيارك ومؤهلاتك.
You have the right to work in the United States at any legal employer, any job that you choose.
لك الحق في العمل في الولايات المتحدة.
You have access to some public assistance. You have the right to travel outside the United States.
لك الحق للحصول على بعض المساعدات العامة. لديك الحق في السفر خارج الولايات المتحدة.
And you have the right to be protected by all the laws in the United States, your state of residence, and local jurisdictions.
ولك حقوق أصلا أنك محميا بموجب جميع قوانين الولايات المتحدة ودول إقامتك والسلطات القضائية المحلية مطلوب الامتثال للقوانين الولايات المتحدة.
And we're reiterating that you are required to obey the laws of the United States, obey all federal, state, and local laws. We mentioned this before.
الالتزام بجميع القوانين الفيدرالية الولائية والمحلية.
But we're reiterating it because if you do intend to apply for citizenship, all of these obligations are going to be brought to light when you file your citizenship application.
لأنه وعندما تقدم على حق التجنس كل هدول الأشياء بيكونوا مدروسين دفع الضرائب واحترام القانون وكل هذا.
Okay, so you're going to pay your federal, state, and local taxes if applicable, and then males between 18 and 26 years old register with the Selective Service.
يجب عليك دفع الضرائب الفيدرالية والولائية والمحلية إن وجدت الذكور أن تتراوح أعمارهم بين 18 و 26 عاماً التسجيل في الخدمة الالتزامية انتقائية.
And then should you just show desire, you can apply for citizenship. Your rights as a citizen are much more expansive. In addition to the rights of a lawful permanent resident, you have the right to vote in elections.
المواطنة والإقامة القانونية الدائمة والتجنس حتى لك الحق بالانتخابات.
You have the right to apply for federal employment requiring U.S. citizenship. Some jobs, for example, that are federal contractors require you to only have U.S. citizenship in order to take that job.
الحق في التقدم للوظيفة الفيدرالية لتطلب الجنسية الأمريكية والبرامج الفيدرالية الأخرى الممولة.
And you have the right to run for elected office.
الحق في الترشح لمنصب منتخب.
We could do a whole program on citizenship, but we're not going to. But that it's a pretty long application. There's a test, English proficiency, civics, history, but we can reserve that for another program.
Okay, so I'm just gonna try to keep this brief because I do want to leave some time for Q&A. So I'll talk about the rights and protections for asylees and refugees when confronted with ICE, but these are really just rights for any immigrant and when confronted with law enforcement, but I'm specifically going to be talking about immigration and customs enforcement.
الهجرة والجمارك.
Okay.
And are you talking about this slide?
Not yet. I was just introducing what I was going to talk about. I was just going to say what the rights and protections are immigrants when they're confronted by law enforcement, specifically immigration officers.
Okay, so بدنا نحكي هلا على شو هي الحقوق تبعكم لما في بيجي مثل الشرطي بيوقفكم بالطريق شو بدكم تقولوا له.
So the specific agency that I'm referring to as ICE, and we hear it a lot through the news in the community, ICE. So these are officials, immigration officials and law enforcement who have the right to detain immigrants.
بدنا نحكي هلا على ايس وايس هي الهجره والجمارك لهم حق انه يوقفوا اللاجئين اللاجئين.
ICE officials can not just detain individuals, but also keep individuals in detention and deport individuals if that so happens.
Sorry, I did something wrong. You're talking about immigrants, not refugees. They don't stop refugees, they stop immigrants, right?
So immigrants and refugees.
Oh,
so
okay,
this applies to refugees, asylees, but it also applies to all immigrants.
Okay, so بالهجرة والجمارك والحق لتوقيف المهاجرين واللاجئين.
Okay. So the way that specifically, I'll just refer to how an asylee or a refugee can be detected by ICE is if there is any arrests or a record of multiple arrests or convictions. So, sorry, you want me to pause?
إنه إذا اللاجئين والمغتربين إذا توقفوا عن طريق الآيس شو بدهم يعني بيصير فيها مشاكل كتير سو هلا بدها تحكي فيها.
So earlier, Sophia explained some of the requirements that come with gaining asylee and refugee status, as well as a residency status, is obeying the laws of the state and federal, as well as local laws.
إنه حكينا صوفيا حكت من قبل إنه لما بتحصلوا على حق اللجوء أو حقوق الجنسي التجنس في أشياء لازم تحترموها هي تحت احترام القانون ودفع الضرائب وكل شيء ما بيصير واحد يغلط بهالبلد.
So either as an asylee or a resident, if you ever are arrested and fingerprinted, that's a way that ICE can be notified that you've been arrested.
لأنه أنتم لاجئين أو مغتربين وحاصلين على الجنسية من جديد إذا توقفتوا وأخذتوا البصمات أخذت آيس بيبلشوا بيسمعوا فيكم وبيبلشوا بيلحقوكم وبينتبهوا عليكم يعني بيحاولوا يلقطوكم.
So not every arrest will automatically trigger ICE to come and find you, but that's just one way that if you're fingerprinted, you'll be in the system and ICE can locate individuals that way.
إذا أخذوا البصمات وتوقفتوا بتدخلوا بالسيستم بالحاسوب وبيبلش الآيس بيطلعوا عليكم وبينتبهوا إذا بتعملوا أشياء غلط.
So what are some rights that individuals have when confronted by these immigration officials?
شو هن الأشياء الحقوق اللي هن عندهم إياها لما بيوقفون هذا بتوقفوا عن طريق الآيس؟
So these rights apply not just to ICE, but any law enforcement official. You have the right to remain silent.
مين ما وقفكم إن كان آيس أو أي شرطي أو أي قانون لكم الحق إنه تبقوا ساكتين صامتين حقوق الصمت.
If ICE, for example, is coming to your home, for example, you have the right to ask if ICE has a signed warrant by a judge.
إذا آيس إجوا للبيت لعندكم ووقفكم وطلبوا إنه يفتشوا البيت بتقولوا لهم إنه في عندكم ورقة ممضية عن طريق القاضي إنه في عندكم الحق للتفتيش.
If so, along with the right to remain silent, if ICE starts asking you where were you born, what is your status, are you a U.S. citizen, you don't have to answer those questions. You can just say, I would like to remain silent.
إذا سألوكم وين كنتوا خلقانين ومنين جايين شو هو شو أوضاعكم القانونية ما بتردوا وعندكم الحق إنه تتموا ساكتين.
And of course, if the ICE official continues to ask more questions and insists that you have to answer, you have a right to ask for an attorney.
وإذا أصروا إنه يسألوكم الأسئلة وبدهم إياكم تحكوا عندكم الحق إنه تطلبوا محامي.
And while in an immigration proceeding, the government won't appoint you an attorney, ICE does have to allow you to locate an attorney. So you have a right to locate an attorney yourself, an immigration official, an immigration attorney. But it be at the cost of the government.
وإذا قلتوا لهم لآيس إنه بدكم محامي، الآيس بيحترموا حقكم والحكومة بتدفع للمحامي تبع الهجرة وهن بيدافعوا عنكم.
So good practice is to carry identification documents on you that are from the U.S. government. For example, like Sophia said, your employment authorization document.
كتير مهم إنه دايماً يكون معكم أوراق بطاقاتكم الشخصية والورقة يلي ورقة العمل.
Or if you have a New York State driver's license or ID, you can carry that as well.
بطاقة سواقة فيكم تحملوها كمان.
And the reason why I say documents from the U.S. government is because if you carry your foreign passport, your passport from your home country, then immigration officials have evidence that you weren't born here and maybe can start a deportation case against you.
إذا بس حاملين معكم جواز السفر تبع بلدكم في معناتها الآيس فيه الحق إنه يفتح دعوة عليكم وإنه أنتم منكم خلقانين هون.
And I know we said that asylees and refugees don't use their foreign passport because they no longer are traveling to their home country, but I just wanted to add that point, that if you do have your passport and ICE locates it, they have information about you.
عادة اللاجئين وطالبين اللجوء ما بيكون عندهم باسبورهم بيكون مأخوذ منهم بس إذا كان عندكم غير ستاتس فيكم ما تحملوا بالباسبور معكم.
So I don't want to go too much into the details, but if you ever are confronted with ICE comes to your door, always ask for a warrant that is signed by a judge.
دايما لما بيجي الآيس للباب لعندكم بس قولوا إنه بدكم ورقة بدك إنه القاضي ماضية إنه فيهم يفتشوا البيت.
Most of the time, the ICE officer will not have a warrant signed by a judge. ICE officers will lie. They oftentimes say that they're NYPD, Department of Police from New York or whatever the location is. So just be aware that you have a right to keep the door closed until they show you that warrant.
ودائما عادة بيكذبوا الايس، سو انتوا لكم حق انه تتركوا الباب مسكر لبين ما يفرجوكم الورقة تبعت الدعوة من القاضي انه فيهم يفتشوا البيت.
If the ICE official does not have a warrant, or has a warrant but it has a name of somebody who does not live where you are, you do not have to open the door.
إذا عنده ورقة بس ما مكتوب عليها اسمكم وعنوانكم ما في لازم تفتحوا الباب أبداً.
And lastly, if for whatever reason ICE forces themselves into your home, you have a right to say that you do not consent to them being in your home and to please exit.
وإذا جبروا حالهم وفاتوا على البيت بتقولوا لهم إنه ما لكم الحق، أنا ما بدي إياكم تكونوا بالبيت أبداً.
Otherwise, just exercise your right to remain silent and your right to speak to an attorney.
ودائما ما تحكوا ولا كلمة، وعندكم الحق إنه تبقوا صامتون وتاخذوا محامي.
Lastly, we're just gonna briefly mention there's been a new proposed rule that will drastically affect the asylum application process.
في قانون جديد اللي هو بده يأثر على اللجوء، طرق اللجوء.
And the reason why we're not going to go too much into the details of this proposed rule is because it's proposed, it is still pending, so immigration is not applying this rule yet.
ما رح نشرح التفاصيل لأنه هيدي القوانين بعد لسه ما هي مطروحة بس لسه ما تنفذت.
But it's just good to be aware for anybody who is on this call who represents asylum seekers. This proposed rule, if it does go into effect, it will affect who could benefit based on the requirements for asylum.
Yeah. So لبين ما يزبط هذا القانون في أشياء ما رح يعني ما منيحة بحقوق اللاجئين، بس لساته منه مطروح بس منه منفذ.
I would say that once the rule, if it does go into effect, it would be published in the Federal Register, and it'll be all over the news. So it'll be well publicized if and when this goes into effect. But we know that the current administration is really interested in restricting immigration, so this is front and center part of their policy.
Yes, and we'd be happy to ask those and answer any questions about the rule. Oh, sorry. If you guys have them, but again, it's still pending. I know we're over time, but I just wanted to be aware of that.
There were some questions in the chat. Holly, should we just go through those, or?
Yes, actually, Elaine's going to pull those questions for you.
Okay.
So we've got two questions. The first one is, how many of the benefits which you listed earlier are still available to refugee and asylum seekers now? I thought Trump has denied these rights and benefits to immigrants from Central America.
So the rights and benefits are still available. I'm not sure specifically what the person had heard about, but the rights that we listed are rights for refugees and asylees still.
Maybe they're referring to like the Remain in Mexico policy, where you have to, because you're talking about the border applications, maybe? Can the person who asked the question maybe speak up? Because those who were claiming asylum at the southern border, there was a Remain in Mexico policy, so they could submit their application if they could get that far, but then they'd have to return to Mexico to await the decision. So there's no benefits that they're going to get if they're in Mexico waiting. But was there a specific question that you had?
And then if you're talking about Central America, I mean, the administration has tried to make asylum in general really hard, and gang-based cases as well as gender-based asylum cases are very common in Central America. So just asylum seekers, it has been harder for Central American asylum seekers to apply and win asylum. But after one, and what we were talking about today, has gained asylee and refugee status and gains rights and that we went over, those rights are still guaranteed.
Terry, do you still have questions? And you're probably on mute. If you do, unmute and ask your question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm the person who posed that question, and my impression was that the asylum seekers at the southern border are totally denied any of these rights and protections. That's not true? I mean, the ones who are in detention centers, they can't communicate with their families? They're entitled to these protections?
Which protections are you talking about? I'm sorry. The right to travel?
Being able to bring your family, and
We're talking about once you've acquired the asylum or refugee status. So the ones at the southern border are applying to be able to get that status and then those benefits.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so it is much harder at the border. You see it all over the news for the women and children that you see that are detained to actually successfully get through the process.
Right.
Right? But once you bypass that and you claim your asylum or refugee status, and everything we talked about today is applicable, all those rights and benefits that they're afforded.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we had another question. If you are a refugee or asylee and are arrested, do you need to be convicted for ICE to seek to deport you, or is the arrest enough for them to seek deportation?
So the arrest is enough for ICE to want to detain you. Specific convictions will make you deportable. So you would have your right to challenge that in court. Like your attorney will argue that that conviction may not automatically make you deportable. And then obviously the government will argue otherwise. But just being arrested and going through the system, there's been individuals who say they're out on bail and their criminal case is still open. ICE can go and pick them up. Can they deport them by having a criminal case pending and no other convictions? That would be a no. Obviously, if there's no other reasons why that person is deportable. So yes, the government has to prove that the person is deportable.
You'll see a lot of the times immigration lawyers and criminal defense lawyers will work together on cases like that because the criminal defense attorney will know the criminal law in and out, and then the immigration attorney will be able to piece that together with the immigration law. So that's where there's sort of intersectionality between two distinct areas of practice. But it's really important to get good counsel on the criminal side. Sometimes people want to take a quick plea, and that might have a stronger immigration consequence, right, than you would otherwise realize. So it's important for the two professionals, the immigration lawyer and the criminal defense attorney, to work together.
And I just want to add that sadly, sometimes, as Sophia mentioned, like if somebody takes a plea and sadly they just didn't want to do all the sentencing and they just took a plea that made them deportable, they can seek something that's called post-conviction relief. But unfortunately, if that is still pending, ICE can still go ahead and deport that person. And we have seen it where ICE will go and say a few days after the person has been out on bond and they have the case, the post-relief pending case, they go and pick them up and they will send them to Louisiana and they'll get deported. And this is still happening and it's really scary. But that's why, like, I just want to reiterate what Sophia says, like challenging whatever arrest at the beginning is really important. And disclosing that the individual, disclosing to the criminal defense attorney that the individual is not a US citizen, because criminal defense attorneys do have to take into consideration what convictions can make a person deportable.
Okay, so I know that Amina has a question, but I also wanted to post in the chat the phone number that people can use to call to get legal advice. So I'm doing that. And in the meantime, also, Amina, could you take yourself off mute and ask your question? And Rania, we probably will need your help with the translation.
Sure. مرحبا. أول شيء عندي سؤال حابة أسأل. أنا
صار لي 3 سنين هون. أنا جيت اللجوء هنا هالبلد، وحابة أقدم طلب الزيارة لأختي. هل يحق لي وتحت أي بند وما الإجراءات يجب أن أتخذها؟
Hi, my name is Amina. I've been here in this country for 3 years, and I would love to go visit my sister outside the country. And شو الحالة تبعيتك؟
سوري لا، مو أنا حابة أسأل أزور أختي، حابة أختي تزورني.
Okay. I've been living in this country for 3 years, and I would love to receive I would love to have my sister visit me. She lives in Syria, right? Okay. And شو وضعك أنت؟ شو عندك؟
عندي green card.
Okay.
وحابة أقدم لك طلب زيارة.
I have a green card, and I would love to petition my sister to come and visit me. Is there any how to do this?
So thank you for your question. So to petition for somebody to visit, there's no such like petition. For visiting, she can apply for a tourist visa, which I don't know exactly what's going on in Syria and U.S. accepting or whether they're accepting.
Given COVID and just the unrest in Syria, the U.S. embassies and consulates, were closed because of health concerns. But if there's other unrest, it's hard to get appointments at the U.S. consulates. Rania, do you want to translate that and we'll give more?
Yeah. بسبب الكوفيد هلا المرض انه ما في هي فيها اختك بس تقدم على فيزا تورست.
Right. So in the visa application, the embassy is going to want to know if you're being like sort of sponsored, like who are you staying with? Who's going to pay for you? Sometimes they do ask for a sponsor letter that you would provide.
وقت اختك عم تقدم على فيزا سياحة بتكتبي لها انت رسالة دعوة، بتقولي للسفارة، بتبعتيها للسفارة وبتكتبي انه انت بدك اياها تجي تزورك وانت رح تدفعي لها بطاقة وهيك شيء يعني.
Yeah, but given the public health emergency, I doubt you're going to be successful. But what I would encourage you to do, go to the State Department website, and you can look up the embassy in Syria, and it'll give you a lot of information on hours, operation, if they're accepting applications, etc. You can Google it.
في على الكمبيوتر في مثل ويب سايت تبعت القنصلة بسوريا، وبتشوفي إذا هن فاتحين عندهم أشغال في مجال تقدمي. بدك حدا يساعدك هون. So, I mean, she needs someone to help her with this, but okay, we can do that. I can help her.
Okay. And I just wanted to add, just in general, because I just wanted to expand on that. So individuals who are green card holders, to petition for family members, they can't petition for siblings, but citizens can petition for siblings to benefit and come live with that family member permanently. So I just wanted to, in case that's something that she was thinking about in the future. But if it's a tourist visa, you have to prove to the U.S. Embassy that you're simply coming to visit and tour. So you have to show ties to your home country. So it would be Syria. Whether you own land there, you go to school there, you are employed there. And I'm so sorry, Reina, I'm talking a lot and you have to interpret.
No, that's
but
easy.
I just wanted to let her know that information.
انه اذا بس صار معك الجنسيه فيك تطلبي اختك تجي لهون لجوء، يعني فيها تجي تسكن هون بس يصير معك السيتيزنشيب. بس هلا وقت اللي عم تقدم على سفر على فيزا تورست بدك تشوف اذا في عندها حساب بالبنك هونيك، عندها ارض، عندها املاك هونيك، انه فيها ترجع تتاكد عشان يتاكدوا انه هي بدها ترجع بعد الزياره.
اوكي شكرا كثير. وحابه اسال سؤال ثاني اذا كان.
Yeah, of course. There's another question.
اوكي نحن هلا يعني صلنا 3 سنين ودخلنا بسنه رابعه. هل يحق لنا تقديم الجنسيه حتى انتهاء السنه الرابعه بدايه الخامس، ام لازم ينتهي الخامس بدايه السادس نقدم على جنسيه؟
They've been here I've been here 3 years and getting into the 4th years. When is the time to apply for the citizenship? Is it next year when I finish the 5th year, or we should start now?
When you've accumulated the 5 years in total.
بس يخلصوا ال5 سنين بتقدمي.
Okay, شكرا.
So if she would like, I'm happy to speak to her personally because we actually do have a naturalization clinic coming up. So I am happy to talk to her more specific, just to keep her confidentiality and not too much details about her personal case.
Okay, got it.
But I'm happy to talk to her and make an appointment and talk to her over the phone.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. She got it. Okay.
I have another question. If someone has been granted status because of their spouse, is their status affected if they divorce?
So that's not, you mean like derivative from a refugee or asylee, or just like what, marriage-based case? Like, do they?
If they're here because because of their spouse, let's say if they were an asylee and they're derivative and they divorce, how does that affect them if they divorce?
I mean, if they acquired the status, they already proved the relationship. Either they did a follow to join or they were granted at the same time. That status stays, it remains. People get divorced, things happen. So when they apply for residency, is that what the question is, or how would they be affected in general? Oh, sorry, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Kathy, you're on mute. Oh, she says, I know.
I know, sorry. In any way, would it have any impact?
It shouldn't. Again, things happen. Immigration should know. If it's a family-based case, like I'll compare it. So if it was like a refugee and say they came together and the spouse benefited and a year happened and something happened and they divorced, I mean, things happen. That's fine. They remain with the status. But if it was like a family-based petition, like say I petitioned for my spouse, we got married, we did the family way, then maybe there'd be some, you have to show different requirements for that route. But I mean, this is my general answer. I don't know what the specifics are of the case, but in general, it shouldn't affect if they get divorced. If they get divorced like right away, then maybe there'll be some questions raised by immigration.
And I would say people just should keep in mind that if you're successful with one application and then years later you're submitting another application, so you got your green card and then circumstances change and then you're applying for naturalization, whatever you put on your application to get your green card, it's still subject to the government looking at it, confirming if what you said was accurate. So if there was a divorce subsequent, right, the government could ask when you're applying for naturalization, we want to see the divorce decree, what was the nature of the relationship, because they're looking for fraud.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the answer is it really depends. Right.
But once they have their green cards, it should be okay.
Well, remember, then they're going to be applying for, if they apply for citizenship years later, whatever those circumstances were could still be relevant for immigration.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
They have to show it, write down all current spouses or previous marriages on their residency application anyway. Immigration wants to know everything.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, there was another question that came in. Are there delays in getting green cards? I heard that COVID has triggered tremendous delays in processing applications. Is not having a green card after being here for 1 year a problem?
There are very many delays in applying for anything, but yeah, I have green cards, especially with COVID. But if the question is there a problem, say if I'm an asylee and I submitted my green card application and it's still pending, you should be fine because you submitted it. But I mean, maybe if you want to renew your employment authorization card, it just depends on the case. But if you never applied for your green card and say you're a refugee, then you have to apply within 1 year. But if you're an asylee, again, it's your option. If the application has been submitted and is just pending, I mean, it's just pending. You can check processing times on the USCIS website. And then if it's over the processing time that they say that they would get the turnaround, you can submit an inquiry and say like, hello, pay attention to my application. Why is it taking so long? But immigration takes a while. There's a lot of delays.
We have people who are waiting, you know, many years, several years, but at least they can apply for those collateral benefits that we talked about earlier. So the employment authorization, the travel document, while those applications are pending. But it's not uncommon for the green card application to be pending for, you know, almost 2 years. And lo and behold, the agency is increasing fees effective October 2nd.
Yeah.
So they need more money to, I don't know what. Hopefully they'll start moving faster through the queue once they get more funding. But that's also something that's in the public domain. So you can see articles on the increase in the fees for these various applications that we're talking about tonight.
Yeah.
And that's effective October 2nd.
And I just want to throw in a plug. We are rushing some naturalization applications for low-income individuals who would otherwise apply for fee waivers. So I will drop my email on here if there are service providers out here who know people who are looking to apply for naturalization. I would be happy to help.
I think that application fee is going from like almost $700 to like $1,000, right? Cecilia?
Yeah, and the fee waiver will no longer be available. There's some exceptions, but yeah.
So that was the last question that we received in the chat. If anyone has a question that they would like to ask, you can unmute or again, put your question in the chat and I'll ask it out loud. Okay, I guess that wraps up the questions and answers. Oh, wait, we got one. I got married to an American citizen in February, and my husband submitted my papers through a lawyer. I did the fingerprints. My question is, what is my status if my husband divorced? My question, what is my status if my husband divorced?
So that seems like a very specific consultation. Again, I'd be happy to offer a free consultation for individuals. I just don't want people to highlight their private case on here, and I would have a lot of follow-up questions, so I can't even make it as a general question. It just really depends on the case. So thank you so much for your question. No worries. Don't say sorry. I'd be happy to help out with some consultations.
Yeah, and Cecilia has put her email in the chat just up a little bit higher. And there's another question. What should schools or teachers do if ICE enters a school looking for parents of students?
Oh, I should not be entering schools because there is some things called sensitive locations. A school is one of them. Another place is a place of worship, hospitals, but ICE is ICE. They are very evil organization, my opinion, but they shouldn't be entering into a school. It's supposed to be some place where individuals should be safe. However, I have heard of ICE cars being outside of schools trying to intimidate the neighborhood, and kids are scared to go to school, and it's such an unfortunate situation. But the only thing that we can say is, know your rights. Don't answer any questions. Don't answer questions of nationality. But if there is individuals who know that ICE is entering schools, I would contact IDP, Immigration Defense Project. They do keep track of immigration enforcement, so we can be more aware of where do we need to provide presentations, where do we need to reach out to ICE and be like, hey, why is your agency coming and intimidating individuals in schools? Things don't always work. They don't always listen, but we try to liaison or try to bring awareness to those situations, but they should not be entering schools.
Okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat. And so unless somebody wanted to ask a question out loud, I think we're ready to wrap up.
I just have one final thing to say. So Cecilia is our Fragment Fellow at the City Bar Justice Center. And so she does a lot of these community presentations. So we're certainly happy to continue partnering. You know, now we're into Westchester because Cecilia, you've been to all the boroughs, right? And you've done your seminars there. But I'm so happy that we're able to partner with Neighbors for Refugees and Hearts and Homes for Refugees here in Westchester to put on this event. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Sophia, and Cecilia, and Rania, and Lillian, and Adriana, and Elaine, and everyone who came tonight. It's been a pleasure planning this series with this group of women. I just want to give you a quick, some quick background about Neighbors for Refugees in case you're new here. We're a non-political grassroots humanitarian group located in Westchester County, and we're organized to welcome refugees and other new Americans. And we advocate for the rights of refugees everywhere and work directly with refugee families to provide them with the necessary services, resources, and community support to bolster their resilience, achieve self-sufficiency, and thrive in their new homes. In addition to refugee resettlement, we provide grants to refugees who are struggling after their first year in America. We've given out over $25,000, for example, since the start of COVID, and created a group of 8 mask makers who have made over 8,000 masks for health facilities, not only here, but all around the country. We would love for you to look for more program like this. Like Sophia mentioned, we are probably going to be working together. We're very excited to plan an additional legal workshop in Spanish in the next few months. And on this Thursday, we actually have a Zoom event with Jessica Godot, author of After the Last Border, with our partner, Welcome Home, several of whom are here this evening. And we also have, in honor of Welcoming Week, which we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, a big meal promotion going on with Fez Turkish Mez in Mamaroneck. And we're happy to say that we sold over 400 meals being produced by several of Westchester refugees. And we're also giving masks with the purchase created by Amina, who spoke earlier. So that's really exciting. So thank you, everybody. It's been incredible, an incredible, helpful learning experience. And we hope we see you again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Great question.
Thank you, Holly and Elaine and everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
you.